joined now by someone who I think has a very unique experience of the TV and film industry, having actually started out in radio. But when she came to work at BBC, she worked across all sorts of genres before going freelance and eventually moving over to the US, still working in the industry. So I think she's done all sorts of things, and I think experienced most of it. So I'd like to introduce Linda Graeme. How are you?
Very well, thank you very much.
And how are things with you across the pond?
Well, you know, we're all in lockdown. It's a bit of a strange time, but we're all getting through it. So.
Oh, good, good. And amongst everything you've done, you particularly time at the BBC, you found time to work on Doctor Who as an AFM. So I was wondering, what does an assistant floor manager do?
The assistant floor manager in those days in the BBC, in drama, was kind of a cross between a traditional theatre stage manager and a second assistant director in film. So you'd be involved from the very beginning of the production. You would basically be responsible for the props, and you would coordinate a lot of other departments. You know, the way that the system worked then, you'd take your scripts and you would pull out any of the exteriors, and they would be, then you'd do like a block filming for all those exteriors, wherever the location happened to be. And once on location, you were more like a stage manager, you know, around second AD actually, in that, you know, you would get the actors together, you'd work with wardrobe and makeup, and you would make sure that the prop department did everything they should. And then you would come back and there'd be a rehearsal period. And in rehearsal period, I guess you'd be a traditional stage manager. When you would run the rehearsals, I think I remember doing schedules for the rehearsals. You would coordinate the actors, make sure they were there. Or you would set up the rehearsal room. You'd get the plans from the designer. And in these massive rehearsal rooms, like 70 by 70 feet, I mean, huge things, you would mark up in, you know, in real measurements, the sets with this tape. And there'd be sort of make-do props, you know, and furniture that you would get from, I think it must have been a central place, and you would set that all up. And you would run the rehearsals, and you would, during rehearsals, you would make note of any script changes that were made. You would make note of any furniture change that was made, you know, where the positioning of the furniture. And then when you went onto the studio, you were, again, a kind of a stage manager. You didn't really have anything to do with the actors at that particular time. But I do remember having to go into the set and say, you know, this chair was moved in rehearsals. You know, it should be sort of 6 feet from where it is now, because all the actors' moves really depended on that. And I think that was probably it.
So you were brought in, you know, at the very start of the pre-production process. Would you have seen it? Would you have seen it through to post-production as well, or is the final day of filming when you sort of hand it over?
No post-production. It was the last day of the studio was the last day. I think there might have been a clear up, because it was so long ago. I think there might have been some, you might have been given some clear up days. But no, you had nothing to do with post-production, no.
So you mentioned you worked a lot on Doctor Who. Was it a show that you're particularly aware of and keen to work on?
Well, I was very aware of Doctor Who, because it had been part of, you know, the consciousness of everybody since the 60s when it started. A memory I have is that I was working in Television Centre, and there was another building. It might have been Threshold House, I forget. But there was this corridor that connected the two, and this corridor went across the studios, and it was sort of high up. And each studio had a little viewing room, tiny little viewing room, and you could kind of open the door and go into this little viewing room and sort of look down what was going on the floor. And I just remember just walking, watching Doctor Who productions and thinking, wow, this is such fun. They're having such fun. I'd love to work on a Doctor Who. And then I was given a Doctor Who. So, so it was no complaints there. It was great. And then I guess I got on very well with everybody because I was asked to do one after the other, which was great. I loved it.
So having worked on, because you worked on all bar 2 of the season 14, would that have been more of a fluke or anything? Because at that point, BBC staff were allocated to productions.
I can't answer that. I mean, maybe I was asked for. I really don't know. I just know that that's the way it was. And I know that when I was doing the last one that I did, somebody in management, in drama serial management, sort of stopped me on the staircase and said, you're going to be working on the Mayor of Casterbridge. And I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, but I'm doing a Doctor Who. He said, well, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. And I said, well, no, I do. So the result of that was that I was working on 2 productions at a time for a while, kind of prepping for the Mayor of Casterbridge while doing this last Doctor Who, that last Doctor Who. So, who knows? Who knows? Who knows the wonders of, BBC management? Who knew? Yeah. But I was very happy to work. I loved working on Doctor Who. It was such a fun thing to do.
So having watched Doctor Who being filmed, how was it to be on the studio floor with Tom Baker and Elizabeth Sladen? Because they were famously a very close Doctor and companion. They had a lot of time for each other on and off sets.
Well, I only worked on one with Elizabeth Sladen, and that was, this big 6-parter set in Renaissance Italy. And I have to tell you, I don't really have any particular standout memories. I mean, I think that, I don't remember anything sort of difficult about her. So there's nothing really I can add about that. I mean, my focus was on, doing my job,
Because I imagine one of the, I suppose, appeals to Doctor Who is that each story, it moves worlds, times. So to start off with a Renaissance periods piece, that must have been, you treat that almost as a historical piece with, lavish costumes, sets, rather than a science fiction series.
Right. Yes, I mean, it was a lot of historical things, and I think I'm trying to remember now, because part of the job of the AFM was also to do research into different aspects of the, you needed in production. And I do remember going to some professor of writing implements somewhere. I don't even know how I found him, but I remember going to meet somebody, and he told me that I think they used the quills they used, but he said they cut the feathers off, God, it's so long ago. But there was something about them having this wax to seal things, because I think it was a big thing with a seal on a letter so long ago. And there was something he told me the way it was done in those days. And that's what I ordered for the set. I mean, that's what I made sure was there for that particular scene. And I remember somebody saying, no, this is wrong. This has got to be wrong. And I said, well, no, it's not wrong. Because I've been into this. So it was stuff like that. And I do remember there was something, I think, was it Last Rites or something? Did something have the Last Rites or something in one of those scenes? In a scene there. And I do remember going to speak to some Catholic priest who sort of gave me some historical perspective about that era. So there was, So my focus was on getting the historical detail right for props and things. And I think for that one, I think we had I mean, it was a very elaborate production, and I think we had some sort of drummers and, you know, these kind of great sort of costumes. And I know that one day on my desk there were all these kind of medieval patterns, and I, you know, it took me a while to find out where they came from, but they actually were put there by the costume designer, whose name I've written down. What was the costume designer's name now? James Atchison, who was a fantastic designer. I mean, he went on to win like Oscars, you know. So I mean, I sort of, I kind of instructed the prop department, I suppose, to do these medieval designs on these drums, like as I recall. So yeah, so there was a lot of emphasis on it being historically correct. And I think we had horses. I think we had horses down there. Because I remember when I arrived in Portmeirion, the production assistant, who's like the production manager on set, I think there'd been a big thing about horses getting loose or something, and I was having to wrangle. I mean, there's a vague memory. But yeah, it was a very elaborate production, and it was great.
And you mentioned there, you know, the location work was done on Portmeirion, which was North Wales. It must have been quite nice to be away from London for a bit. You know, the whole cast and crew must have really bonded during all of that.
Well, I think no more so than any other location, in truth. But it was a very, I mean, it was just an idiosyncratic place. I mean, it was a crazy, crazy place. And you know, the guy the architect who designed and built that place was there. He was still alive, and he was there, and he was fascinated by our filming. And I remember he used to join us for meals. You know, we had catering truck, and I remember him lining up. And we built this set of polystyrene. I think it was like an old temple, a ruined temple or something. I think it might have been where the TARDIS appeared and disappeared, if I remember. But it was this polystyrene, you know, little temple. And at the end of the shoot, I mean, it wasn't me, I was obviously told about this, you know, they were trying to dismantle it, the crew were trying to dismantle it, and he said, no, please keep it here, and it was, maybe it's still there.
Oh, wow, Doctor Who's added to the location there, and wow.
Maybe.
But from there, your next Doctor Who was perhaps more true to form, which was almost half location and studio, and set on an alien planet, which was the Deadly Assassin. Did that feel more like sort of typical Doctor Who?
Well, you know, when you're working on a production, each one is its own little animal. So you never really think about that. You know, it's like, you know, you have a job to do. I had nothing to do with the creative development of any of these things. You know, you're given a script, and whatever it is you're working on, really, you're given a script and you break it down, and you make sure that script is realized. You know, you do your part to make sure that script is realized. So I can't say I particularly thought about that. I do remember thinking that all the scripts were quite wonderful. I thought they were really incredibly inventive. I was always marveled at that. And with that one, I think it was that one. Might be getting a couple of them confused, but I think it was that one where we did have a lot of special effects. Is that the one where he goes into the Matrix? He goes into the Matrix, I think. And so when he went into the Matrix, we had, I mean, all of us, it was very kind of involved, you know, in BBC. You were really kind of this cohesive unit, and you all kind of like contributed to a lot of the visuals that you saw. But I remember that he went into this, maybe it was in the script, he just goes into this like nightmare scenario in this Matrix. And so I think we all had a couple of days trying to think of, you know, nightmares. What could be a nightmare? And there was one, I think, with sort of World War One, the image of World War One with these gas masks, and like we have gas masks for a horse. And what were the other things now? God, I can't remember. I think being in an operation room. But we had like a whole day trying to think up, you know, these nightmare scenes. What would be horrific? And I think it was that one where we had dead fish. I think we had dead. Was it? Yeah, it can't have been another one. We had dead fish in a pond. And for some reason, I had to go again to some London University professor who sort of researched fish and get these dead fish They were quite big, and they were in a cooler. I had them in a cooler. I think I had to put them in the fridge, the freezer of the hotel we were in. So it was like crazy stuff like, oh, well, I think that one, God, now I've completely forgotten. There was something about the special effects designer not being well. And for some reason, as I recall, I had to take all his paraphernalia to location in my little mini. And one of them, yeah, we must have had an alligator as one of these nightmare things. Oh yeah, you're nodding your head. So this this full-length alligator was in my mini, and with the head was on my shoulders. I was driving down to wherever we were filming this. So it was like crazy stuff. And I think all the stuff was in my hotel room. Wherever we have, but I remember, I think I made somebody take a Polaroid picture of me in the car with this alligator, and God knows where it is. It would have faded by now, right? Old Polaroids. So yeah, so that was that, and it was I mean, I think it was fun. Oh, another story about that that I remember that I had to do. I remember there was a bit with these cameras. I don't mean the BBC cameras. I mean like a futuristic camera. They were filming the stage, and then at one point, I think somebody goes past the camera, and whoever the camera was, it the camera operators or somebody else, is like a miniature inside the camera. They've been shrunk. Is that right? Well, those little shrunken things were Ken dolls that I bought in a toy shop in Finsbury Park on my way to the set. So it was fun. It was fun.
So it sounds like Doctor Who kept you on your toes, and it must have been a particularly challenging show, because I can't think there's that many that would have all the the normal elements, but video, visual effects, model shots, all the various elements combined, and so extensively as well.
Yes, I mean, for me that made it all the more interesting. I can tell you that part of my I'm not sure it's my job. If I made it my job, I don't remember. But we used to have these, we're all involved in special effects meetings. And there was one, it might have been for that Doctor Who, because there were so many effects, but we had this meeting in our office that went on for like an entire day. And it was back in the day. So, and everything was BBC regulation. We had these sort of Bakelite ashtrays, BBC regulation, Bakelite ashtrays everywhere. But every hour or so, we had to open the door to let the cigarette smoke out. Because whenever you smoke, it was the entire day, with the special effects guy saying, okay, well, in this sequence, I thought we'd do it this way, and we'd do it that way. And I vividly remember that one of the things I would do every day before rehearsals, maybe it was before rehearsals, but specifically I remember doing during rehearsals, I would go to the special effects studio and watch what they were working on to make sure that it adhered to the script requirements. So I remember doing that.
So would you have always been there for model shots, and you would have obviously scheduled the actual filming, but you would have had involvement in the model side of things as well?
No, I wouldn't put it like that. I mean, I think I do remember. I remember working with Ian Scoons, who was very Ian Scoons. I remember him showing me a lot of things, but that no, I was not involved in putting them on film, as it were. I just remember making sure that what they were working on was per script requirements, per story requirements, because special effects people could kind of go off on a tangent. Well, what if we do this, and it wouldn't be what is required of the script in that particular point. So that was just a matter of going in and saying, how's it going? What are you doing? It was that. I mean, I had no authoritative role over them, but it was just a matter of that coordination, really, I suppose.
Because your first story with Louise Jameson did have an awful lot of model shots in the form of Tom Baker's head, was sort of carved into a rock face. Oh, something like that. had a lot of supporting artists. Would you have been involved in booking those, or was that someone else's department?
No, I'd never involved in booking artists. No, and no, I wouldn't have had very much to do with that. No, I mean, I was given plans of the sets, studio sets, as I said, to mark them up in the rehearsal room. But no, otherwise, no, that would have been, their baby. That was a designer's baby.
And the director for that story was Pennant Roberts, who is someone that many actors pick out. Would you have had a lot to do with the directors at the time?
Well, we obviously worked closely in rehearsals, very closely in rehearsals, and Pennant was no exception. I think Pennant was, kind of very inclusive. I mean, Pennant and I sort of continued. We stayed in touch for a long time, very long time. So I remember his being a very nice guy. So there's an assistant floor manager in the BBC. Yeah, you kind of formed little relationships with the director.
Because in terms of Doctor Who, you also worked with Rodney Bennett and David Maloney. Are they names that also, particularly stand out?
Well, I remember. I don't remember much about Rodney. I don't. I mean, we did, the Masque of Mandragora, that big, Renaissance Italy thing, and I think because it was my first Doctor Who, I think I was so anxious about getting everything right. I don't remember many interactions with him. I remember David Maloney. I worked on 2 with David Maloney. I might even have worked on something else with David Maloney. And I remember him, he's been a really fun, great guy. He was a great guy to work with, David Maloney.
So by the time you come to do Deadly Assassin, Face of Evil, Talons of Weng-Chiang, Doctor Who, you're fairly established now as to how the show runs and the people involved. Did it feel very familiar, I suppose, particularly by Talons of Weng-Chiang?
Well, it did feel very familiar. I mean, I was very familiar with all of Doctor's paraphernalia, there was something, a sonic screwdriver and all these different things that were kind of kept in, they were kept in a big cardboard box in a producer's office, all these things. And yeah, I did at that time, I did kind of remember becoming known as a Doctor Who girl. And there was, I think the London Evening Standard came to do a piece. And then they mentioned me, which was very nice. Very nice. And I, for some reason, I was kind of very au fait with all of his bits and pieces, all of Doctor Who's bits and pieces. And people would come to me for, to ask what could the sonic screwdriver do, or something like that.
And am I right in thinking it was on Talons that you had quite a lot to do with the magic tricks that Tom Baker had to perform?
We were supposed to do a lot of magic, I've located magicians. As part of my research, I found this magician who introduced me to the magic circle, and one person in particular who turned out to be a director of Marks and Spencer's. And I called him up and he said, "How did you find me?" It was, he wasn't very pleased. We did bring a magician on to rehearsals, and Tom Baker actually couldn't do. He was a bit of a klutz. He couldn't do the tricks. So something was devised for him, a very simple thing with a pan. You open up, there's nothing there. You open up, there's a dove, magic dove. And I procured magic doves from a breeder who actually, bred doves for magicians. I'm not sure how you train a dove. I ordered doves through him, and they came down to me, and I had to take care of these doves till we went on location. And then the trick was done, lo and behold, the trick was done, and something happened to these doves, and they were let go, and they sort of flew into the rafters and were never seen again. So, the magic doves.
So it sounds like, the BBC, and I suppose particularly Doctor Who, in the mid-70s was a wonderfully varied and exciting time to be working television. How had you got to be in BBC drama?
Oh, I think by design. It was something I always wanted to do. I do remember before being in the BBC, being at somebody's house who'd lived near television centre and looking up and thinking, wow, how do I get there? So I basically took a job. I was offered a job in radio drama. And I did that for a little while. And then I asked him, he moved to television. And I moved to television. And then they kind of bounce you around. But I always really wanted to be in drama. I actually did, I did everything I could to be in drama. I mean, I did work on some great current affairs shows. Met every major politician of the time, including Margaret Thatcher. So it was very exciting. I mean, I can tell you, I floor managed for Newsnight, what was it called, the evening show. And you know, it's a very different culture in that department, totally different culture. And they would say to you, well, you know, we're doing this interview. Why don't you go and floor manage? Say, oh, okay. So the first time I did this, I was hustled into this little tiny studio in Broadcasting House, which is a little tiny new studio with automatic cameras, 2 automatic cameras. And I was given this like rundown. This is how you do it. Cans, countdown, stop, countdown. And then, so it all went fine. I mean, I was like rigid with anxiety. And then I heard over the cans, I heard, I guess the director saying, okay, give him 5 minutes. And I thought, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. What do I do? I thought, maybe if I say it very quietly. So I said very quiet, 5 minutes. And then I could hear this eruption in the crowd. What is she doing? What's going on? And after that, they said, now hold 3 fingers up under the camera. So that was you can take that out, I think. And another time in that department, I did floor manage an interview with the then South African foreign minister, and it was during apartheid. And he came to this tiny little studio. And he came to the studio with 2 henchmen from the embassy, who were like the scariest people I've ever seen. They were like automatons with blue eyes, with no emotion, very tall. Knew they had guns, which is like, really unusual. And they came up to me and they said, are you going to floor manage? And I said, yeah. And they said, here's a tape recorder. When he starts talking, you turn it on. When it stops talking, you turn it off. And okay. And that was it. And they were just like the scariest people to this day I've ever come across. So that was that, yeah.
So having already worked in the BBC before moving to drama, you must have had a wonderful idea of how it worked and how to go about researching anything that dramas could throw at you, surely.
Well, no, I don't think, no, because researching for a dramatic piece, you know, every script is different, you know, and every script has its own requirements. So it's kind of, I think you just have to have a kind of a good imagination, really. I think, well, this is an obstacle, and then all production is like that, really. You know, this is an obstacle, how do I get around it? So you just kind of, well, okay, writing implements, gee, I wonder if there's a writing expert somewhere, you know, so you just, it's just a matter of just, well, all research is like that, isn't it, you know? Just finding out where to go to get whatever you need.
So by the time you work on something like Shoulder to Shoulder, where you're a producer's assistant, is there as much research, or is it more sort of the overall scheduling side of things that you're involved with?
No, it was really as a producer's assistant, and I worked as a producer's assistant in drama with the famed Verity Lambert. I mean, you're her assistant, you know, you're kind of like her secretary. I think that I know that people made a big fuss about, you know, wow, you know, you have to know so much to be a producer's assistant, but basically what you did was book viewing rooms or something, you know, and send out her little memos. And Verity was baptism by fire, I have to say. Enough said about Verity Lambert. I know it was great working with her, but it was really baptism by fire. And that show had some really interesting people involved. We had Georgia Brown, and we had this woman called Midge McKenzie, who was a real pioneer in many ways. So they were fascinating people.
So was that a show that particularly prepared you for life as a freelancer? You're working with all sorts of interesting characters. How did that move come about?
After Doctor Who, I did this Mayor of Casterbridge, which was with Alan Bates, was the big series at the time, and that was very exhausting, as I remember, but rather great. The whole thing was done on location. And then I went to BBC Birmingham, and I worked on a couple of things there. One was a rock musical, which had its own, oddities, sort of special requirements. And then my time at the BBC was up. It was time to go. So I threw myself into the freelance world. I really didn't know anybody. It was a lot of anxiety, a lot of cold calling. I think at one point I recall through the union, the ACTT, the union called me up and asked me if I could floor manage a thing for London Weekend Television. And I said, sure, of course. Yeah. And so I went down, and it was the Kenny Everett show. It was the Kenny Everett show. And it just so happens a lot of people working on that show I knew from Current Affairs. It just kind of so happened. And I remember sort of going, it was pouring rain, I remember going into the studio and saying, I'm here for the Kenny Everett show. And they said, the audience is over there. I said, no, I'm the floor manager. So I was whisked in, and I was told that it was going to be a crazy show. They had all these, like really wacky people were there. I think Spike Milligan was going to be there. And, God, I can't remember the names of it, but really, like people who were like comedians who were way out. And they said, the producer said to me, this is going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy. You'll probably be on camera. Just do the best you can. And I was really shaken in my boots because and then I think the director came up to me and said, do you mind very much if the floor assistant did this show? Because, he kind of needs the experience, and he's been with us a long time. You can just kind of watch, make sure he's okay. Fine. So and it was a wacky, crazy show. Crazy show.
So was it as a freelancer that you obviously had, I suppose, a little bit more control as to what you're working on, but really had a particularly wide range of the types of shows? Because I suppose you're no longer in dramas or serials, comedy.
Well, the thing is that there's always this paranoia about work, about, will I be working? Will I not be working? It's not that there are very few people who have the latitude to be able to say, well, I'm not doing that, but sometimes there were these magic moments when you had 3 offers, and you could, what can I do? Because I remember turning down during my freelance period in England, and I was a second AD, I remember turning down a Benny Hill show because I'd been offered this feature, and I thought the feature would be better for me career-wise. I suppose I always have a little regret about that, because that would have been quite an experience, right, with Benny Hill. But no, it's like, kind of what came along, you did. I discovered I was the first woman to work as an AD in the British film industry. I didn't hold that title for very long, but I had it for a little while. And I was hired on my first show, which is The Professionals, because the first AD was able to have a drink with his buddies at Pinewood Studios on Friday night, which is where everybody used to go. And he could say, guess who my second AD is? It's a woman. And everybody would say, get out. And he'd say, no, it's a woman. So I was hired really for that. And, everybody was very trepidatious of me. Could I deal with the extras? Because as a second AD, you were in charge of extras. You would hire the extras through central casting. I remember a woman called Penny who used to run central casting, sort of old broad. And you would pay them at the end of the day. You would negotiate their pay at the end of the day with the accountant. And they'd say, I want this money. And you'd say, I'm not paying you that. And you didn't do that. Or something. Or I'll give you so much for doing this. So, you know, and I think people, because it's a very male-centered industry, it certainly was then, you know, there was this feeling that if you were a woman, you couldn't quite handle it. You couldn't quite go in the middle of the road and stop cars, you know. Shooting here, we're shooting here. So, but yeah, so.
It must have been nice to find yourself working on things like The Professionals, Minder, you know, what I imagine were fairly busy, you know, fast-paced productions in, as you say, was a very male-dominated world then.
Yeah. Yeah, it was quite fast-paced, as I remember. You know, it was a lot more. I think it was more demanding, as I remember, than the BBC, because, you know, time is money. Although time is money in the BBC, but it seemed to be a bit more kind of. There was more kind of latitude. Felt like you were having more fun at the BBC. You know, once you left the BBC, it was really it was work. You know, it was work. And yes, things did move very quickly. Like, you know, next shot, next shot. So, and as an assistant director, second AD, you were really involved in sort of doing the call sheet to the first AD's or the production manager's schedule. Because I remember calling up every day and saying, well, what do you want to put on the call sheet tomorrow? And they'd give me the scenes, and then I would work through with the actors, and you know, and I have to go around the different departments saying, how much time do you need? You know, and give them time. Then I'd have to call the actors to get the actors there, and give any special instructions to different departments.
So having made that transition from BBC staff to freelancer, you then also made the transition to work in the US. Was that quite a sort of natural move in your career, or was it just sort of how things happened?
No, it didn't just happen. Very little in my career has just happened. You know, in the early 80s, Britain was going through one of its recessions, and production stopped. You know, there was very little going on. It was a very fallow time. And I think I just felt I wanted to try new pastures. So I just took the plunge.
And how different is it, or was it, to work in the US? You know, because obviously it's all freelancers, but there must be very different processes.
Well, actually, no. The difference was between the way the BBC worked and everybody else worked. I mean, really, you know, the way a crew is kind of delineated, different functions of the different crew members, is the same there as here. They just have, they might just have different terminology. You know, like in England, they'll say turn over, you know, to start the camera. And here they'll say roll camera. And then we just, you know, just terminology is a bit different. You know. And I was watching the little film you sent me about the special effects on Talons of Weng-Chiang, right? And the special effects guy, who I now remember, was testing a little explosion, and he calls out, "There's a little explosion here." And here they'll just say, they'll call out, "Fire in the hole." So there's a terminology different, but basically the job is the same.
Because by that point, you know, you wouldn't have had any American credits. Was the industry quite welcoming to someone that had done an awful lot over here?
Well, it depends on what part of the industry. I mean, the short answer is really no. The DGA here would never recognize British credits. I mean, maybe they do now. They certainly didn't single me out, because I know a number of people who were refused entrance to the DGA, but they just didn't recognize British credits. I mean, having a British pedigree does still mean quite a lot here. You know, I mean, people are impressed by BBC. You know, it does have a lot of meaning, and they're kind of impressed by having British credits. But and I did the work I did here on production was really for sort of non-union, because the DGA just didn't recognise British credits. That was their thing at the time.
And am I right in thinking you moved perhaps a little bit more into development side of things more recently, I suppose, than the AD side of things?
Mm. Well, I mean, that didn't come out of the blue. I was always very, you know, my love was drama. Really, my love was drama. And, you know, of course, essential to that is script. So I've always had a real kind of soft spot, affection for writers and for scripts. So that wasn't, I mean, that was kind of a natural kind of move, really, to kind of start working with scripts and start working with writers, and try and get things launched, but basically developing scripts with writers. I mean, it was a real love, because I you know, it's the drama part that's interesting to me.
So as you start off the BBC and move to the US, who are the people that you particularly learned from and you know, work closely alongside them throughout all of this?
Oh, well, of course, you learn something from everybody, you know, and you pick up experience and tips from, you know, from everybody you work with and every production that you work on, because each has their own challenges. Your kind of understanding of the way things work kind of increases, you know, and your confidence increases. So I'm not sure I can particularly, I mean, I had a great experience working with the director of the Mayor of Casterbridge. We worked very closely. When every night after filming, we would do rehearsals for the next scenes, the next day's scenes. And he was a wonderful actors director. And doing that and also being in this length, I think we had like 6 weeks rehearsals or something before we went on location. It was a long time. I mean, I may have been wrong, but it was a long time. We had long, sort of deep rehearsals. And watching him develop characters with really wonderful actors like Anna Massey and Alan Bates was a revelation to me. It was, I felt like I was, you know, going to college every day with his rehearsals. So I suppose, you know, there was that, and there were other production people that I worked with. You know, they kind of just introduce you to different aspects that you kind of retain, I suppose. You think, oh, my knowledge has increased there.
As a freelancer in development, you've always learned from the people you're working with.
Mm. Yes, I think so. Just like every production you work on has its unique challenges that kind of increase your understanding.
And I suppose a slightly more unusual challenge, I believe, was trying to mark up a Doctor Who rehearsal room whilst having a comedy double act try out some new material. Am I right in thinking?
Yeah, that was it was marking. I'm sure it was a Doctor Who sort of marking up. So I was there by myself in this gigantic space by myself, and it just so happens that Morecambe and Wise were in the adjoining rehearsal room, and so they kind of they came in to see me, and just riffed off each other for, like, you know, I can't remember how long it was, like 10-15 minutes. I just remember being just doubled up with laughter. I mean, they left me in a puddle of mirth, you know. So it was, and you know, things like that happened at the BBC. It was, you know, it's like the old kind of, you know, sort of cliches about working in a studio where, you know, sort of Red Indians are walking by, and you know. So yeah, that was kind of fun. That was fun.
Well, we've touched upon all sorts of things that you've done, and you know, I'm aware there's an awful lot more we could talk about. But I think on the note of two comedy greats, whilst working on Doctor Who, I'd just like to say thank you very much for your time, and it's been fantastic to touch upon just some of the things you've done.
Thank you very much.